All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about funding and the recommendations that my administration have made to the Board of Education. Let me talk a little bit about how this webinar is going to go. So I will do a recap of the presentation that I and my administration gave to the Board of Education on August 9th. And what our recommendations were and what that impact is on our taxpayers. We'll do a recap of the real specific spending around the mill levy override and the bond. We'll look at the ballot language and talk about what happens next. And then I'll leave about 20-25 minutes at the end to answer all the questions that I can possibly get through. When we get to the question and answer time, you can type that into the question and answer box, or you can use Zoom to raise your hand and we can get you unmuted. All right, so with that, I'll get started. I always start with our kids and what we want for our kids. We want to make sure that Douglas County School District continues to be an amazing place to work and go to school, a destination district that attracts not only families and teachers from across the county and across our country, but also attracts businesses to our wonderful county because they want to come and give their families the opportunities to be part of Douglas County schools. We want to make sure that we have a pathway for all of our students to make sure that we're creating as bright of a future as possible for each and every one of our kids. And that involves focusing on pathways, whether our kids are destined to go to college or to start their career right away or somewhere in between, or going on a service route. We want to make sure that they have everything they need when they leave our system to start their future successfully. We also want to continue to work with local industry to make sure that we're providing what local industry needs in terms of graduates. So many of our kids, like so many of us, will stay in Douglas County and choose to raise their families here. And we want to make sure that every school in our community is a point of pride for everyone in our community, whether they send children to a public school or not. 70% of our community don't send kids to public schools, but a public school is still so much an anchor in a community. And we want to make sure all of our schools are so amazing that they're a point of pride and a central point of gathering and of community relations. So I would like to go over really quickly how our school district is currently funded so that I can give you some context for why we made this recommendation to the Board of Education. Public school funding in the state of Colorado is driven by the School Finance Act that was passed in 1994. The state legislature every year sets the amount of money that each school district will receive in that year to educate kids. So consider that our bucket. So every year the state legislature sets Douglas County's bucket, how much money we're going to get to educate kids. The funding that actually goes into that bucket is part local and part state. So part of it is local from our local property taxes, and part of it comes from the state's general fund, which is income taxes and sales taxes. What's so unique about this is as local funding goes up, so in other words, assessed values are higher, we have more homes in Douglas County, we have more businesses, we're raising more money locally. As local money goes up, the state share simply becomes less. It doesn't change Douglas County School District's overall funding picture with local prosperity. That makes us different than the cities, the towns, Douglas County, the other municipalities that are funded locally. When we receive more money locally, we just receive less from the state. So it doesn't change our financial position. What can change the size of our bucket that we have local control of here in Douglas County is a locally approved mill levy override. All districts have the right under the School Finance Act to ask for up to 25% more funding through the local mill levy override. Douglas County School District currently receives 12% more funding through our local mill levy override. Other school districts, however, receive 25% or right about 25% of their funding increased through a local mill levy override. This creates an enormous funding gap between us and other school districts and is the crux of the matter as to why we can't compete for our staff members. This graph here will give you a view of the history of mill levy overrides in our area, run by us as well as other districts. And you can see over time the gap between us and other districts has become significantly greater. And the greater that gap is, the harder it is for us to compete with other districts for teachers and all of our staff. This is another way of viewing that same information. So this is how all of the districts around us are funded in terms of their local share and their state share. And then their mill levy override is that locally approved piece that is on top of their state set bucket. The state set bucket is the black box. You can see that Douglas County School District currently receives $1,151 per student through our mill levy override. But if you compare us to one of our nearest neighbors, Cherry Creek, they receive a total of $3,000 from their mill levy override. So that's a $2,000 per student difference. That's an enormous difference, and it equates to a lot of money. In fact, if you look at our student count, that equates to that 1951 per student times our student count of 63,876 is about $124 million a year. It's an enormous gap, and it's the reason we can't keep up competitively. Even though we keep things very skinny in terms of our efficiency, central administration, we try to be as efficient as we possibly can, but it takes all the efficiencies in the world can't overcome a $124 million funding gap. And so we do struggle to pay our teachers competitively. And you can see here the annual teacher salary on average across the school districts in the 21-22 school year as reported by the Colorado Department of Education. We were at $57,919, and Cherry Creek, as an example, was at $76,050. So in other words, there's an $18,000 difference between our average teacher salary and that of Cherry Creek, which is right over there. And that is indeed where we lose teachers to. An $18,000 difference is enormous. We also struggle to compete in all of our other employee classifications, from our custodians, bus drivers, educational assistants, assistant principals, principals, all across the board. We have the same struggle to compete in terms of our wages. So why can't we just cut administrative costs? Why can't we just make sure that we're more efficient? We are actually incredibly efficient as we sit right now. What you see before you on the left, that's our total expenses and where it goes. 85% of our expenditures go to salaries and benefits, so our people. If you take that salaries and benefits piece out and make it into its own pie, only 4% of that pie goes to school administration, and only 1% goes to central administration. So the rest are all teachers, support staff, et cetera, that are needed for our schools. And just to give you another example, we have 23 human resources professionals to serve our 8,500 employees. So that's a 1 to 370 ratio. Other districts' ratios are closer to 1 to 100 or 1 to 250, and industry standard is 1 to 50. So we are incredibly efficient in terms of how we operate. The School Finance Act contemplated that capital funding, so building schools, maintaining schools, also comes from the local community. In the same way that as citizens of Douglas County, we're responsible for building our libraries, we are also responsible for building and maintaining our schools. We do that in the district through bond elections. And you can see this is a history of bond elections over the years. Between 1984 and 2006, we passed a bond in our school district approximately every 3 to 4 years, about every 3.5 years on average. That allowed us to build all of the schools that we have today and to continue to maintain them and keep them up to date. Then we went for a very long period of time, a 12-year period, without any kind of capital funding. Without capital funding, we had no way to continue to do capital maintenance on our facilities, because again, all of the capital piece, building and maintaining our schools, is expected to come from the local communities. Because we let that amount of time lapse, that 12-year lapse, the bond that was just passed by taxpayers in 2018, 4 years ago, was used to cover all of that deferred maintenance from the 12 years. So replacing roofs and HVAC units and making sure that all of our critical maintenance needs in our 111 buildings, most of which are schools, were taken care of. Looking forward, we have to continue to maintain our 111 buildings. This will never go away. We will have capital maintenance costs every single year. Right now, they average about $30 to $35 million a year for our capital maintenance costs for our 111 buildings, most of which are our schools, of course. We also have to look at building new schools. Our community is growing in certain pockets in enormous ways. And we need to provide new neighborhood schools for these communities in the same way that new neighborhood schools were provided when I moved into Douglas County with my growing family 22 years ago. And this is how it works. We pay these taxes in order to build new schools. The folks in Castle Rock paid taxes to build schools in Highlands Ranch. Folks in Highlands Ranch paid taxes to build the schools that my children attended. That's just how it works in our local community. We're responsible for building those schools. We haven't built a school since 2010. We haven't built a neighborhood school since 2010. And we do have communities that are growing and need to have a neighborhood school in order to absorb that growth. So as a result of all of that information in that situation, it is our recommendation, myself and my administration's recommendation to the Board of Education, that they consider a bond and a mill levy override for the November 2022 ballot. We are recommending a $60 million mill levy override to make our compensation more competitive with other districts so we can continue to retain the amazing professionals that we have in our school district and attract the best. Now that mill levy override would equate to about $943 a student. So it wouldn't get us all the way to a $2,000 gap, but it'll make a lot of progress. On the bond side, we recommended a $450 million bond for capital expenditures. And that bond would cover building and expanding neighborhood schools and ongoing capital needs for the next 3 to 4 years. Our master capital plan estimates that our capital needs will be about $800 million over the next 5 years. So $450 million is not going to cover everything, but it will absolutely keep us going and make sure that our schools continue to be safe and great places for our kids to go. So what does that look like for taxpayers? So for taxpayers, passing both the bond and the mill levy override would cost $1 a week per $100,000 of home value. Your home value according to the assessor's office based on current values. So it costs $1 a week based on your current assessor's value. So for example, a $500,000 home would cost $5 a week or about $51 a year for the average taxpayers. I think I said that wrong. But I'll get to that back to that in a second. The mill levy override, let's talk about that specifically. So on the mill levy override side, where would that $60 million go? And how do we know that it's going where it's supposed to go? Well, first we have to look at our mill levy override and we look at our schools in our Douglas County School District. 25% of our students attend our charter schools under Douglas County Schools. And so that allocation goes out to our charter schools. They are having the same challenges that we are, which is that they can't pay their teachers and staff competitively. So they would use the mill levy override in the same way the district would. We're making sure that teachers and staff are paid competitively. Essentially, the dollars follow the student within our school district. The district allocation would be $44.5 million. And so again, on the impact of the mill levy override by itself is also that $1 a week per $100,000 in home value. So that $500,000 home that I used as an example would cost $5 a week or $255 a year. The $51 per year is per $100,000 in home value. So that's what I said before about both the bond and the mill. And that's because when we get to the bond is actually a zero impact bond. It will not impact the current mill levy rate that is charged for bonds. So it will not mean a dollar impact for taxpayers. So it's a $0 net impact. Okay, so this is the taxpayer impact of the MLO. where would that MLO go? We would do district compensation changes. About 70% of our compensation goes to our licensed staff. So this is our teachers. And that's about 70% currently of our district compensation. And the other 30% goes to our support staff and admin pro tech. So we would divide the mill levy override up in about the same way, that 70-30% balance. In terms of our licensed staff, we have communicated with our staff exactly what their increase would be should a mill levy override pass. So we've actually published salary schedules for our licensed staff that are post mill levy override, so that every teacher in our district knows exactly how much money he or she would be making if the mill levy override passes in November. And I give a couple of examples here. A teacher with 4 years of experience and a bachelor's degree would go from $46,354 to $51,915. A teacher with 10 years of experience and a master's degree would go from $59,311 to $66,427. So this is a significant impact on our teachers and on their salaries. We would make this impact retroactive to July 1st. So they would also see a lump sum going back to July 1st. Our non-licensed staff would receive a flat percentage raise. So our classified staff, these are the folks who are paid hourly in our district. It's all of our support staff, whether they're custodians, bus drivers, front office, people in the front office, education assistants, helping with recess, whatever the hourly folks are, which are most of the support staff in our district, they would receive a 9% increase, flat to what they're making today. Our professional technical staff, so these are our human resources professionals, our IT professionals, the folks that help make our district run, they would receive a 6% increase. And our administrators would receive a 6% increase because we are struggling with assistant principals. Got a couple of district director jobs open that we're having a hard time filling because we're not paying enough. So again, that competitive problem is all the way across our district. And so, of course, the percentage is lower, but nevertheless, we made sure that every staff member is included because we are struggling to compete in every area, in every classification with all of our staff. And so those would be flat percentages. So again, every employee of Douglas County School District knows exactly what they would receive, what it would mean for their family if the bond and mill levy override were to pass. And again, those changes would be retroactive to July 1st. This is what we would look like if we were to pass an MLO. So if we were to pass a mill levy override, we would now be represented by the bar on the far right that's circled. So you can see we would be much more competitive. We would not be the highest funded district by any stretch of the imagination, but we would be much more competitive, and it would make us much easier for us to have salaries that will help us compete with other districts. All right, on the bond side, we are recommending a $450 million bond for growth, maintenance, and security. This bond would invest in new neighborhood schools, capital maintenance for our existing schools, and safety and security upgrades. So this is a high level view of where the money would go. New construction for growth areas, that's $216 million. Student programming at 54.5, safety and security at 15.5, 139 for capital maintenance and renewal, and then bond fees, management, and contingency at 25. As I mentioned earlier, the taxpayer impact of a bond all by itself would be a zero net impact in how much you're currently paying. So there would be no change in the current mills for our bond. Now, if a bond were to not pass, you actually would see a slight decrease to your taxes. So I want to make sure I'm fully transparent about that. If a bond does not pass, there would be a slight decrease. If a bond does pass, the mills would stay the same. This is because just like with our homes, we buy a new home, we mortgage our home, and now we're paying this mortgage payment. And then after a number of years, we're able to refinance or pay off some principal or do whatever that would reduce our mortgage payment. But what we do is we take out a HELOC to finish the basement. So our mortgage payment stays the same, but now we have a finished basement. It's very similar to that. As our mortgage payment steps down, we fill it in with another mortgage payment. That's what keeps that zero impact piece working. All right, on the new construction side, we need new neighborhood schools in Sterling Ranch, Crystal Valley, and the Canyons. Our master capital plan again calls for 5 new schools in the next 5 years, but that is more than we can ask taxpayers for. So based on looking at capacity and where our schools will be significantly over enrolled, looking at mobiles, all of those things, that's where we decided to focus our energy. So those 3 neighborhood schools, again, would be in Sterling Ranch, Crystal Valley, and the Canyons. I've been asked if I mean charter schools. I do not mean charter schools. These would be traditional public neighborhood schools, not public charter schools. And an expansion of Sierra and Mesa Middle School would also be in this bond. That allows us to, expanding those 2 middle schools, allows us to not have to build 2 new elementary schools in those areas. So it's more a more fiscally sound decision to handle growth. On the student programming side, we would invest in athletics and activities upgrades. This is nothing too exciting. This is just making sure that our tracks and our fields are resurfaced as they need to be based on their age. We would add additions to our career and technical education programming at our newest campus, the Legacy campus, which is the former Wildlife Experience building. The programming that we're putting in that building will be incredible, and we will be able to serve about 1,000 kids. And that programming includes things like becoming a certified nursing assistant, EMT, advanced robotics, advanced manufacturing, aviation, a whole number of amazing opportunities for our kids to leave our system fully prepared for a career or with a huge step ahead when they get to go to college. Special education programming, making sure that all of our students have access to great career and tech ed opportunities, as well as making sure that we have the programming that we need for our growing population of students with special needs. Remember, this is a capital investment. So this is changes that we need to make to buildings, et cetera, to make sure that we can accommodate all of our students. Our total investment in benefits for our population of students with special educational needs is $10.2 million. You can see that in the commentary below. There are other items that are within the other line items. Information technology would come in at $18.3 million, and that is truly just for a device refresh across our entire district. We have 63,000 devices, believe it or not, in Douglas County School District. And just like in your businesses and everywhere else, we need to make sure that we have them on a regular refresh cycle of about 4 years, so that we're able to refresh our technology for our kids. And that's the $18.3 million. On safety and security upgrades, we want to make sure that we have the latest and greatest security equipment, radio communication, and that we're continuing to perform and maintain our building upgrades for physical safety and security. Around capital maintenance and renewal. So some of the feedback that we received from the Mill Bond Oversight Committee that oversaw the 2018 bond spending was that they really wanted to see a more specific bond plan, and that is what we have provided. And that is in particular around district educational facilities capital maintenance. So you can see on our website exactly what each school will receive in terms of the projects, understanding that over the next 4 to 5 years, as priorities are shifting or as environment is shifting, we may have to trade one project out for another. We would invest $7 million in maintaining our charter school buildings. We would invest $2 million in LED upgrades district-wide. This saves us on operational costs in terms of our energy spending, as well as in replacing lights and the labor that it takes to do that. Code and safety upgrades, including ADA and special education, making sure that our playgrounds and our buildings are accessible to all of our kids. District facility emergency capital maintenance, that's an allowance for emergency capital maintenance that comes up from time to time. And then transportation, we have many buses that are more than 300,000 miles. It's a lot, so we need to make sure that we have our buses also on a refreshment cycle so that we're continuing to make sure that we have buses with lower miles and that are safe for our kids. This is what the ballot language would look like. This is at least what we recommended to the Board of Education in terms of ballot language. This is for the mill levy override, and it would talk about retaining and attracting quality teachers and staff by increasing district salaries to be more competitive with neighboring school districts. Our Board of Education has asked staff to come back to them on August 23rd with a resolution so that they can be very clear about how they plan to spend that mill levy override money and actually do a resolution around this is what compensation will look like post mill levy override. In other words, those new salary schedules and those flat percentage raises. That locks the Board of Education into spending the money exactly that way. So that resolution combined with the ballot language really is very tight and locks them in. In terms of 5B, this is what the ballot language for the bond would look like. And you can see that it's mentioned in there that this is no expected increase in the district's current mill levy rate, and that the purposes are listed here, including capital improvements and maintenance in existing facilities, implementing safety and security upgrades, constructing and equipping 3 new neighborhood schools and expanding 2 neighborhood schools. And then the other capital improvements as described in the district's published bond plan. So we have actually published a plan, again, that shows that very specific list of projects and where the money would be going very precisely. So what are the next steps? The Board of Education meets again on August 23rd. And at that time, they will consider and vote on an election resolution regarding a $60 million mill levy override and another one regarding a $450 million bond. They also, as I mentioned, want to consider a resolution around compensation should the mill levy override pass. They also would look at intergovernmental agreements with the election authorities in both Elbert County and Douglas County. And once they make a decision, if they decide to move forward with putting ballot initiatives on the ballot in November of 2022, then the Fair Campaign Act kicks in, and staff and district resources cannot be used to advocate for a bond mill, although we can certainly continue to educate our community on how our district is funded and what we're struggling with. Finally, the Board of Education currently has a mill bond oversight committee that oversees the expending of the 2018 bond and mill levy override. They would want to extend that committee to oversee the expenditures for the November 22 ballot initiatives. That is a citizens committee. They have openings. So if you would like to be part of that accountability process, please apply for one of those openings. We would love to have you. The Bond Mill Oversight Committee meets regularly and looks at the actual expenses compared to the plan and the ballot language to ensure that those expenses are being held to the ballot language and the plan. And then they report out to the public as well as to the Board of Education. If you're interested in getting involved in making sure that we're able to pay our teachers and staff more competitively and accommodate growth and maintenance in our district, you can look at either one of these QR codes. We have a website, and on our website, you will find a number of resources that I just want to show you really quickly. Let's see, you will find, this is what our website looks like, and it's at the top. When you go to our website at the very top, you can see this My DCSD Future Funding Needs. That's how you get to this page. There's a quick video to learn about how our district is funded, a lot quicker than this webinar, so about 5 minutes, and a variety of resources that will tell you more about the funding. And the one that I want to look at is the Comprehensive Mill Bond Plan 2022. And so that document goes through everything that I just went through, how we're funded, what our needs are, how we compare to other districts, as well as specifically where the money for a mill levy override and a bond would go, to include a list of schools. At the end here, there is a list of schools, and by school, you can see what the actual improvements would be by school. So that's all useful resources for you to take a look at when you get an opportunity. There's also an issue committee that will be supporting the bond mill levy override called investindcsd.com. With that, I would be more than happy to take any of your questions about this funding, about the recommendations staff made to the board, and I'm happy to do that. So Allison and Ann are here to help me get questions.
Great, thank you. Can you explain a little bit, I'm interpreting this question, but how student count and the mill are related? So how per pupil funding?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm glad. That's a great question to whoever asked that. So the mill levy override in Douglas County has traditionally been a fixed dollar amount, and that continues to be the case. So currently the district receives $74 million a year in mill levy override funding, and we're asking for another $60 million a year. So because it's a fixed dollar amount, the dollars per student changes as our student count changes. So as we get more students in our district, the buying power of that fixed dollar amount diminishes, because it'll be fewer dollars per student as our district grows. But what also diminishes is the impact on our taxpayers. Because it's a fixed dollar amount, as we have more homes, which you can see everywhere, more homeowners paying that fixed dollar amount, and more businesses in our county paying that fixed dollar amount, it's less per person. So that tax impact will actually diminish over time as well. And it is important to say, we know assessed valuations are about to go up. Because this is a fixed dollar amount tax impact, the dollar tax impact won't be affected by higher valuation of your home.
Great, thank you. And then clarifying if there's any difference between the amount that our charter schools will receive per pupil and our district schools will receive.
Nope, we take our funded pupil count, Douglas County School District's entire funded pupil count, which includes all of our charter schools as well as all of our neighborhood schools. And we divide the total mill levy override by that funded pupil count to come up with dollars per student. And then those dollars would follow the student, whether they're in a district run school or in a charter school.
Great, thank you. Where does capital funding for charter schools come from? No neighborhood schools in 10 years, but many charter schools have been built.
Charter schools have to sort out their own capital funding to build their buildings. So they are allowed to issue debt. The school district is not allowed to issue debt without the permission of taxpayers. The charter school can. And so they do have the ability to build that building out of their state per pupil revenue, but they're paying a significant mortgage payment, which also means that they're at a strong disadvantage in terms of how they're funded, because they're paying for that mortgage payment. But that's how our charter schools have been able to build buildings.
Okay, now we have a question from someone with a raised hand. JB, go ahead.
Hi, JB.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Hey, good. Hey, so I have kind of two questions. Everybody talks about the tax value. And so I guess kind of a point of clarification, is a tax value based off of actual value or assessed value? And so
thank you. Yeah.
When I go to the Oversight, my house is 573K and it's assessed at 40K.
It is actual value. So the dollar per week would be per $100,000 of what the assessor's office calls actual value.
Okay, perfect. So
sometimes we call it the assessor's value, because it's the value that the assessor's office determined, but then you can mix that up with assessed value.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then my other question too, this is kind of one of the questionable questions I have. So I mean, we're in a largely conservative county, and we're asking for a tax increase, and then we're also kind of had a precarious start with our liberal constituents. So how do we respond to those fears? I think you said it earlier of the MLO/bond being spent. It's locked in on spending, that it can't be deviated to legal challenges, arming teachers, et cetera, et cetera. How do you respond to that?
That you responded to it for me. You did perfect. But truly, we've made sure that the language is very tight, and that the language and the questions are very tight, along with creating this bond and mill levy override plan, so that it's very evident exactly where those dollars will go, not providing room for deviation into other things. That being said, I work with all 7 members of our Board of Education. They have all been incredibly supportive when it comes to funding and our funding needs, as well as these specific allocations of our bond and mill levy override dollars. We are very aware that this is going to be a challenge, especially looking at an inflationary economy. And as you mentioned, JB, also with our past and just, you know, what a struggle it's been in our community as well as across the country in terms of conflict. This is something, however, that I have found that people really do agree on. We need to pay our teachers more competitively. We need to pay our staff more competitively. We need to make sure that we're accommodating new student growth in our new communities. So by making it super tight and by making sure that oversight committee is in place, that will really help. I really appreciate the question.
Great. We have a lot of questions asking about builders and their responsibility toward funding and why schools weren't built prior to them being allowed to come in and build homes.
Oh, very good. Okay, let me see. I'm going to take those one at a time. The way that the law works in the state of Colorado is that developers are obligated to dedicate land for public school use. And so there's a calculation in the statute that looks at how many kids their community is expected to produce and how many acres of land that would result in terms of needed schools. So the developers have to dedicate that land for school sites under the statute. They also have in many parts of our county a voluntary impact fee per unit that they pay to help with capital improvements in that area related to the schools. So for example, crosswalks or crossing lights, that kind of thing. That is where the developer's obligation is. It is our community's obligation to actually build those schools. And we don't build schools before the fact because you can't run them if you don't have the kids. We get funded per student. So we've got to have the kids to be able to run the operation of a school. So we can't kind of build an empty school building and then have the development grow up around the school building. And as a community, that's up. Building the actual schools is up to us. The funding happens through the school district through a bond election. But the funding comes from our local taxpayer dollars and only with our approval. So I hope that helps a little bit. So as I mentioned, in prior years, 1984 to 2006, we passed a bond approximately every 3.5 years, which allowed us to build all of the neighborhood schools that we have throughout our district today. In order to be able to continue to provide neighborhood schools, we need to continue to look at a regular bond cycle similar to what we did from 1984 to 2006.
Okay, and then we also have several questions on safety and security and what those funds, as much as you can share, will be going to.
So I'm going to jump back to that slide. So the funds are allocated in this way. So security equipment, making sure that our cameras, for example, are completely up to date. Our systems that control our doors and our cameras and all of those things. This is also, we have 111 buildings. So this is also making sure that we are replacing them as they're aging and keeping up with the latest and greatest. So that's on the equipment side. And also servers, that kind of thing that houses our equipment. On the radio communication side, we're working to make sure that every single school has radio communication directly with law enforcement. And so continuing to make sure we're keeping the latest technology in that regard in our buildings. So that's what the radio communication side is for. And again, that just means we have to constantly be upgrading our radios. And then our building upgrades are making sure not only that we're continuing to upgrade our buildings, but if there are buildings that we upgraded a while ago, we want to make sure we revisit them so that they have the latest and greatest. So just making sure that all of our buildings are benefiting from the latest and greatest equipment and security, and that we've learned our lessons along the way about ways we can constantly evolve and improve, and that's where those dollars would go. I hope that helps.
Awesome, thank you. A little bit of a follow-up. Is there a large gap in our security compared to other school districts based upon this funding gap?
Absolutely not. We've worked really hard to make sure we've absolutely prioritized security in our district. In fact, Channel 7 just did a story last night on our where they interviewed our safety and security director, who's a former FBI agent. We're very, very proud of what we're able to do in Douglas County with safety and security. And making sure that our buildings are as secure as possible. We have great partnerships with law enforcement, to include the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Parker PD, Castle Rock PD, and the Lone Tree PD. We all work together in lockstep when it comes to security, having school resource officers in our buildings, practicing together, doing drills together. We do everything together. And our community has been incredibly supportive. Our county commissioners dedicated $10 million to help us perform upgrades over the last few years. The 2018 bond helped us perform significant upgrades. We feel really good about where we are, but we need to continue to evolve and make sure that we stay. If you want to make sure you have the latest and greatest, you have to continue to manage those upgrades. You can't just decide we're there and then stop. So we want to continue to make sure that we are well equipped and have the latest and greatest, but we're in a really good position.
Great, thank you. Most of this question has been answered. It was asking about specific areas. It popped in before you talked about that for the bond for our 3 new schools. But can you talk about what the expansion to Sierra and Mesa Middle School will accomplish?
Over the years, if we're able to put more 6th graders into Mesa and Sierra, then that means that our elementary schools will not be as overcrowded as we're experiencing growth. And we can start to avoid the use of mobiles. We would very much like to avoid the use of mobiles where we possibly can. So, and that's something that's this wouldn't happen overnight, would happen with our community while talking to our community. And of course, any kind of new construction will take some time to complete. In fact, a new elementary school in the Canyons or Sterling Ranch, for example, 2025 would be about the earliest we could get a new school open, given the construction timelines that are out there right now.
And we have a new raised hand, Lo Escobar. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oops, hang on, let's try that.
Hello there.
Hi, how's it going?
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for holding this meeting. My concern, it goes back to what the previous lady was talking about, the security in school. So the only thing that I have noticed is, you bus to get into school and they just let you in and you check in at the office. But to me, at least in my daughter's school, that's how it is. And to me, if they see you on camera and they just open the door, that's not pretty safe. To me, I'm pretty concerned on that. And also, all the schools, elementary schools, playgrounds, they're just on the open. So, is anybody else concerned about that with the security school being like that? I understand you guys are working very hard on that, but I think anybody can get into the school, even if they bust the door.
I appreciate both of those comments. On access, you should have to ring that doorbell and make sure that our front office recognizes and knows who you are before you are buzzed in. They do get to where they recognize our parents, and so they know who you are when you're ringing the doorbell. But that being said, if you've had any concerns along those lines, the very first place to go is to talk to the principal at your school, because that's very operational in nature. And then if you aren't satisfied with the answer, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. We want to make sure our schools are as safe as possible. On our playgrounds, we are working very hard to make sure that the playgrounds are less accessible to the outside and fenced in, et cetera. And that's what we are endeavoring to do for sure. So I hope that helps. If you have more detailed questions, though, I would like you to reach out to me and email me, and I can have our Director of Safety and Security give you a call. But in terms of operationally, make sure you talk to your school first.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
That.
Thank
Yes,
you very much.
Uh-huh.
Great, thank you. here's a comment. Completely agree that teachers need to be paid more. Assuming these changes are made, it still seems as if Douglas County will be lower than some of our neighboring districts. Why aren't we making sure that we are at Cherry Creek district levels?
So that would mean asking for $120 million mill levy override. And I believe it was JD who mentioned earlier, you know, we live in a county that really takes a careful look at taxes. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't ask for an amount that would ensure failure of the initiative. So we want to make sure that we're asking for a reasonable amount that has a reasonable impact on our taxpayers, understanding that it's not going to get us all the way to where Cherry Creek is. And that, you know, we may have to ask again in another 4 or 6 years. So that's really a reasoning, making sure that we're keeping the impact to our taxpayers responsible and reasonable, while getting us closer. And I also will say, because we're so efficient, we do spend our money really efficiently, and that will give us some advantages in terms of what we're able to pay competitively to our staff and to our teachers. And we're in Douglas County. We've got amazing families. We have amazing families and kids in Douglas County, and our teachers and staff love working with you and your children every single day. This is a great place to live. It's a great place to teach. It's a great place to work in a school district. And so we've got that advantage as well, that we have a wonderful place to live and work. But I hear your point 100%. It really was about keeping our ask at a reasonable level.
Great. How can we educate everyone about how many positions are open, how many teaching positions are open, recognizing that we've collapsed some open positions, found short-term workarounds. Is there something we can do to convey the need for an MLO to hire these positions, not just raising pay for our current staff and teachers?
That's a very fair point, and we need both. We need to make sure that we can retain our staff, and we also need to be able to fill our open positions. We do have a number of open positions. I don't have those numbers right in front of me at the moment, but we've got what we need to make sure that we're running our school year, but we absolutely have openings where we need to continue to have staff. Teachers are part of it, but so are our custodial staff, our building engineers, our bus drivers. We have lots of openings in those areas as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. And that really is a big part of it. If you want, we have to be able to pay for them. I have a daughter myself who's worked in our district as a para, an educational assistant, and she worked at Walmart on the weekends because she just couldn't make enough money as an educational assistant, but she was so dedicated to kids that that's where she wanted to be. So we really need to make sure that we're competing all across the board. As far as how we educate our community, that's why I'm doing this, and that's where you can help. As a parent and community member in Douglas County, I would ask you to talk to your neighbors to make sure that they're able to watch that 5-minute video that talks about how our schools are actually funded. I think when you get information in front of people about how the funding actually works and what the actual situation is, it becomes really clear why those challenges are there and how to fix them. So I would ask that you talk to your neighbors and communicate with the folks that don't have kids in our schools about what funding looks like for our district and what it'll mean for our teachers and for our staff.
Okay, now we have a question from Kristen, raised hand.
Okay. Hi, Kristen.
Trying to get her to unmute. Kristen, can you unmute? Okay.
I'm sorry, that was an accident.
It's
I'm
okay.
yeah.
Me too.
I
All
didn't have a
good.
question.
We can hear you now if you want to go ahead and ask your question, Kristen.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know how my hand got up.
Oh,
I don't have a
okay.
question.
Oh,
I
good.
apologize.
Oh, you're all good. Thank you so much. All right. All
Not
good.
a problem. We do have a question from Clarissa.
Okay. Hi, Clarissa.
Try and get Clarissa to unmute.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We sure can. Thank you.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for taking my question. I have a few. I've emailed you before, Erin, and I appreciate you responding back to me. I'm new to Douglas County. This is going to be my second year. I have a middle schooler now in Mesa and a high schooler at DC, and she's a junior.
Okay.
So I have a few questions, but my whole thing with, is there any type of training for the teachers to deal with children, or not necessarily deal with them, but how do we discipline children? At what point is it, you know, a teacher kind of puts their foot down and says, this is what we're doing and not doing, as opposed to just getting a referral and me getting a call home? So last year she was in elementary school, and I kind of went through that issue a lot.
So I would say that the very first thing that you'll want to do is make sure that you talk to your teacher about your concern. We're really trying to promote those teacher-parent relationships and that mutual understanding. So I would say make sure you talk to your teacher first about a concern that you have with discipline going on in her classroom. And if you're not if you're not satisfied with that communication, then the next step you would take would be to talk to your school principal. So that's not something that can be managed from my office. That really is something that each individual school deals with. And our principals are so dedicated to making sure that they have great environments. So the best thing you can do, Clarissa, would be to go in, meet, have a face-to-face conversation about what you're concerned about.
And I have, and we all know, like, we've had a lot of turnover in some of the schools here, especially like Flagstone. They lost their principal and moved on to greater things. And so, you know, that's kind of what we're getting at. But my thing is, she was there for 5th grade and 6th grade. So at what point is it that teachers, is there more? Because I feel with just giving a kid a referral for doing something that is against a little bit of the grain, at what point is it like, where do teachers get trained on how to deal with that, instead of making the child feel so negative about themselves, about them feeling like they just don't know how to talk to teachers? And it also shouldn't be a how do I say this? My child was told that she needs to have a person to talk to. She needs to have an adult at school that she can talk to and be comfortable with. And so at what point are teachers trained and given that education to, not every kid is so, it's not all easy for all kids to talk to an adult, especially a stranger.
Oh, sure.
Instead
I
of
completely
making
understand.
I feel horrible about themselves.
Oh, I'm so sorry that you had that experience, but I truly would ask that you talk to your school. At a district level, we are working on making sure that we're supporting our teachers in terms of training, and especially with behavior management. It's actually something that has been more of a struggle since the COVID pandemic, and it's something that we're making sure that we provide supports with. But the best thing parents can do is talk to their teacher and talk to their principals. I really appreciate your question. Thank you.
Great. Several questions. Sorry, I was getting back to where I needed to be. Talking about the plan for our underutilized schools. And specifically, you mentioned in the 9 News interview that there might be some in Highlands Ranch that need to be looked at. When would that be happening?
So we'll be engaging in a process this winter with our communities that are under enrolled. So we have communities like in Highlands Ranch, where people like me moved in with their kids when they were little and stayed. So after their kids went through the system, we stayed in our houses, and our kids weren't replaced with new little kids because we all stayed in our houses, right? So we have declining enrollment areas in some of the older areas in our district. We will be engaging in a conversation with our staff and community to determine what that looks like. What I don't want to do is make sudden knee-jerk decisions as far as consolidating or repurposing schools. What we do want to do is engage with our community and create a 3 to 5 year plan so that everyone can see into the future and knows what this is going to look like, next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And that's a process that has to happen with the community. So if you live in the Highlands Ranch community, you can expect to be involved in those discussions over the next year. And again, we need to get proactive. I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm on the news talking about how many schools I have that are below 250 kids. We just can't operate efficiently like that, and we have to plan ahead. I also don't want to be have staff members in a school wondering if next year is the year that my school gets consolidated. If we have a 3 to 5 year plan, we've set expectations, everyone knows what that's going to look like, and we need to do that with full input from our community and from our staff, and that's a process that we're committed to engaging in. I wish I could just pick them up and plop them into Crystal Valley, but it doesn't work that way.
Thank you. We have several questions coming from different places, but
Okay.
maybe talk about philosophy on our teachers, on how our teachers will be treated in what they're teaching, not indoctrinating in any direction, etc.
All right, so
our questions, we've had some other questions, and
sure. So our teachers teach to the Colorado academic standards. So that's what our teachers should be teaching, to the Colorado academic standards. But it is really important to us. I think one of the things that we can do to help retain our staff, in addition to making sure that they're being paid competitively, is to treat them like the professionals that they are. Teachers are incredible. They've had a heart for kids since they were young and wanted to go into teaching to help others. They do amazing things with our kids. It is the teaching young children to read, for example, is an absolute science. And being able to, can you imagine being in a room with 30 first graders and somehow having them read at the end? Our teachers do incredible work every single day, and they deserve our respect and admiration, and to be treated like professionals in their district by me, by us, the community, and to make sure that we're treating each other that way. I want to make sure they have a great work environment. I want to make sure they know I'm fighting for their compensation, which I am, and just making sure that we're giving them that respect. As parents out in the community, you can help too. Do what we just talked about. Always go have a conversation with your teacher. If something comes up in a classroom that you're uncomfortable with, whether it's a lesson or something else, have a conversation with your kid's teacher. It's amazing how many things can be resolved when we just have a conversation face to face and seek to understand each other. So that's the greatest thing that parents in the community can do to help us make sure that we're giving our teachers the respect and admiration that they deserve, while also making sure that parents are getting what they want from our school system.
Thank you. Here's a good question. Somebody is seeing that there's quite a few roles like bus drivers and cafeteria staff, what we call our classified. Are there any avenues for parents to volunteer for those non-certified positions to try to cut down on payroll shortages?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. Absolutely. Please go talk to your school. Talk to your school leader, talk to your school about what volunteer opportunities are available in your child's school, where you can help out with a lot of that critical stuff. Things like helping supervise kids at recess or helping in the cafeteria. Those things are so needed by all of our schools, and that really does help us, especially as some of our schools are struggling with openings that they can't fill. So thank you so much for that. And I also would encourage everyone on this call, if you've ever had an inkling to be a bus driver or to be an education assistant, anyone can go do that. And it's so much fun. So you can also apply for any of those positions on our website.
Great. And also we are putting up our careers page there in the chat. And there's a specific page on becoming a bus driver. And those positions just are in the budget. So thank you for wanting to volunteer, but their budget
but you can
is
apply
paid
too.
for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
Exactly. We just have a couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and see if Maxim, he's been on for a bit, is able to unmute and ask hopefully a quick question for us.
Absolutely. Hi, Maxim. Can
You're
you hear
unmuted.
me
Go
okay?
ahead.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for your presentation. And I have a couple of questions, but the main one is about finding new teachers and returning teachers back to Douglas County. Because, for example, the school of my son already lost 7 teachers last year. Somebody went to another district, and maybe somebody went to another area in general. But if you speak about another districts, so it looks like we will have to find teachers and come back them. And for doing that, we will have to pay much more than, for example, pays Cherry Creek, and give them more advanced environment. So are you sure that this amount which you include to this bond request, 60 and 450, is it enough for that? Because if we have right now 50K per year, so it means we'll have to increase it at least an 80, just because we need to find the teachers with limited environment.
Yes, I absolutely appreciate your question. And if we wanted to be at the exact same level, we would have to ask for 120 million. But if we ask for 120 million and it gets voted down and we have 0, we definitely won't be able to compete. So it really is a balance between what we can ask for and what we can pass. Because if we pass nothing, then that is not going to, obviously that's not going to change our situation at all. So $60 million will help us. I am not going to lie to you and tell you it is a magic wand that will, sunshine and butterflies, because we are not going to be at the level that Cherry Creek is, but we are going to be a lot closer. We are starting to have teachers come back to our district from Cherry Creek, from other districts, which means that it's a great place to work. So they balanced out a lot of other things. We just need to continue to make sure that we're creating a great environment to work, that our schools are welcoming for our parents and our staff, and that our parents are great partners for our staff. So all of those factors are things we can affect. But believe me, we understand the math and we know that it isn't at the level of Cherry Creek. So we have to look at all kinds of factors. But we had to ask for something reasonable to give us a good start.
Thank you. Well, it is 1 o'clock, and we just want to thank you. We had a lot of people. We had close to 400 at one point, and we have a record number of questions that we have not been able to get to. So we will be working on getting those compiled, a lot of duplicates, into our FAQ on that same funding page. And thank you. And we also have put our emails in there several times in the chat. You're welcome to email us directly. But
yeah, please reach out directly if we can help answer questions. And I also just want to say to all of you that are on this call, thank you for taking your time. Thank you for being invested in our district enough that you're spending part of your workday listening to this webinar. I'm really grateful to your support for our teachers and our staff and all of our kids. So thank you for being engaged. Thank you for being here, and I hope it was helpful. I hope everyone enjoys their afternoon. Take care.